My name is Sarah, and this story is one I never thought I'd share. But here I am, reflecting on how a series of small choices led me down a path I didn't see coming. I always thought I was happy with my husband, Jake. He's steady, reliable, and truly a good man. We've been married for almost 10 years, and we share a love for the countryside, the peace and freedom it brings. But somewhere along the way, I found myself feeling, well, a bit invisible. The story begins when we decided to bring a beautiful chestnut horse named Luna into our lives. She was majestic, gentle, and, strangely, seemed to sense things about me that even Jake didn't see. Spending time with Luna became my refuge, a place where I could unload my thoughts and find a sense of calm. On days when Jake was away at work, I'd saddle up Luna and spend hours riding through fields and forests, feeling the wind on my face and the world at my feet. And that's where Joshua comes into the story. Joshua was our neighbour, a seasoned horse trainer who often helped with Luna's care. He was charming in an unexpected way, friendly but not overly talkative, with a quiet intensity that intrigued me. Jake and Joshua had been friends for years, and Jake trusted him completely. So, when Joshua started offering to show me more about handling Luna, Jake encouraged it. At first, our interactions were innocent. Joshua would guide me through training exercises, giving me tips on how to communicate with Luna. He had a natural way with animals, a kind of patience and understanding I admired. But gradually I found myself looking forward to our training sessions a little too much. When Jake wasn't around, Joshua would come by to check on Luna, and we'd end up chatting for hours in the barn. Sometimes I'd catch myself laughing at his jokes or feeling flattered by the subtle compliments he'd drop. I knew it was harmless, or at least that's what I told myself. One afternoon, things took a turn. Jake was away for the weekend, visiting family, and I was alone on the property with Luna. Joshua had come by to help with some maintenance in the stable, and after we finished up, he suggested we go for a ride together. I hesitated but agreed, telling myself it was just another friendly outing. Riding with Joshua felt different than riding alone or even with Jake. There was an energy between us, something unspoken yet unmistakable. As we galloped through the open fields, I felt a rush of excitement I hadn't felt in years. We stopped at a clearing, and I climbed down to catch my breath, laughing like a schoolgirl. Joshua watched me with a quiet smile, and for a moment, the air between us grew thick with unspoken tension. I could tell he felt it too, but neither of us said a word. After that ride, I couldn't stop thinking about him. Every time I saw him, there was a spark, a feeling of electricity that was hard to ignore. I convinced myself it was just in my head, but the more time we spent together, the stronger it became. Joshua seemed to sense my feelings but never made a move. He respected my boundaries, which, in some strange way, only made me more drawn to him. I felt seen, like he understood parts of me that I'd kept hidden for so long. One evening, Jake came home early and I noticed him watching me with a look I couldn't quite place. It was as if he sensed something was off. I brushed it off, but that night, as we lay in bed, I found myself turning away from him, my mind racing with thoughts of Joshua. I knew I was playing with fire, but I couldn't help myself. The next day, as I was feeding Luna, I saw Joshua approaching. He looked at me with a concerned expression, as if he'd noticed the change too. "Are you okay?" he asked, his voice soft yet steady. I felt my heart race, and before I could stop myself, I blurted out, "I think I need some space, from us." He nodded, respecting my decision without question, but his silence felt like a goodbye I wasn't ready for. And yet, I knew I had to walk away. After that conversation with Joshua, I tried to throw myself back into life with Jake, focusing on our routines and reminding myself of all the reasons I married him. But it wasn't easy. Joshua lingered in my thoughts like a shadow. Every time I saw him around the property, I felt a pang of guilt mixed with something I couldn't quite define. A sense of loss, maybe, or regret for something I never had in the first place. Jake seemed oblivious, but I could tell he was growing suspicious. He began asking me more questions about my days, wanting to know where I'd been or why I'd spent so much time in the barn with Luna. I brushed it off as him being protective, but inside, I worried that he sensed the rift growing between us. I knew it was unfair, but I couldn't bring myself to explain the connection I'd felt with Joshua. How could I, when I barely understood it myself? One evening, Jake announced he'd planned a weekend getaway for us. Just the two of us, like old times. He'd rented a cozy cabin by a lake a few hours away, complete with hiking trails and a small dock where we could fish. I felt a surge of relief and a flicker of excitement, hoping that maybe this trip would bring us closer and help me put Joshua behind me for good. Jake was trying, and I owed it to him and to myself to try too. The cabin was beautiful, tucked away in a quiet spot surrounded by trees. The air was crisp, and the lake glistened in the evening light. That first night we cooked a simple dinner over the fire and shared stories, laughing about old memories. I felt myself relaxing, finally letting go of the tension I'd been holding. For the first time in weeks, I felt like we were back on solid ground. But that night, as we lay together under the stars, something unexpected happened. Jake turned to me, his face serious, and asked, "Sarah, is there something you're not telling me?" His voice was calm, but his eyes searched mine, looking for answers he'd been afraid to ask until now. I felt a rush of panic, my mind scrambling for a response. "What do you mean?" I asked, trying to keep my tone casual, but he could see right through it. "You've been distant, distracted. I see you spending hours with Luna and Joshua, and I get it. You love that horse, but it feels like I'm losing you." His words hit me like a punch to the gut. I had never thought about how my actions might look to him, or how my distance had affected him. Jake was steady and reliable, but he wasn't blind. Taking a deep breath, I reached for his hand. "Jake, I don't know what to say. I've been feeling things lately that I can't explain, and it's not fair to you." My voice broke, and for the first time, I felt the weight of my choices, the gravity of the lines I'd almost crossed. He nodded, his hand tightening around mine. "If there's something we need to work through, tell me. Don't keep me in the dark. I love you, Sarah, but I need to know if you feel the same way." In that moment, I knew I had a choice. I could keep hiding, or I could be honest. And so, I told him everything. Not in detail, but enough for him to understand the emotional connection I'd felt with Joshua, the sense of escape it had given me, and the guilt that had come with it. To my surprise, he didn't react with anger or accusations. Instead, he listened, his face a mixture of hurt and sadness. When I finished, he took a deep breath and spoke softly. "I don't blame you, Sarah. Marriage isn't easy, and sometimes we lose sight of each other. I wish I'd seen the signs sooner." His voice was thick with emotion, and I felt tears in my eyes, realizing just how much I'd underestimated his understanding and patience. In the days that followed, we worked on rebuilding the trust that had been fractured. It wasn't easy, and there were moments of tension and awkwardness, but we were both committed to making it work. I promised myself to keep better boundaries with Joshua and to focus on my marriage with Jake. A few weeks later, I saw Joshua again, and this time, I felt a sense of closure. We exchanged polite greetings, but there was no longer that unspoken tension between us. He respected the distance, and so did I. The emotional storm had passed, leaving behind a sense of clarity I hadn't felt in years. In the end, that almost affair was a wake-up call, a reminder of what I stood to lose. And as Jake and I continued to build a stronger foundation, I knew that our love had been tested, but had come out even stronger.